We found an identified body that fits the clothing description of our missing person. We are still waiting on the coroner to identify her.
She told me she was scared for her life. There was crazy stuff going on. That's not a headline. That's not a theory from a comment section. That's what a woman named Sandra says her close friend, Elena Catherine Moore, told her weeks before Elena disappeared. And now, 6 days later, Elena is dead, pulled from a creek bed beneath a bridge in Lexington, South Carolina. 8 to 12 feet below the road her own neighbors drive over every single day without a second thought. So before we go any further, sit with that for a second. A friend says she was afraid. A husband says she was not well. And somewhere underneath those two sentences is whatever actually happened to Elena Moore. No body camera caught it. No witness saw the moment it happened. Just a creek, a bridge, and a woman who walked away from a gym on a Thursday night and never came home. For most of last week, this looked like a story that could happen to anyone, anywhere. Elena Catherine Moore was 39 years old, married, working as a personal trainer in a town most people outside South Carolina had never heard of. She didn't vanish from a dark parking lot. She didn't disappear on some remote hiking trail in the middle of nowhere. She signed into a Planet Fitness on a Thursday evening, the same gym she went to most weeks, on a routine night in a busy suburban shopping center, and walked out the door into a quiet neighborhood and never came home. That's the part that should unsettle you more than any of the darker theories floating around this case. Nothing about that Thursday should have been dangerous. There was no isolated trail, no late-night drive down an unlit road, no obvious red flag in the setting itself. It was a gym, a parking lot, a walk home that should have taken minutes. And yet, underneath that completely unremarkable evening, according to one of Elena's closest friends, something had already been building for weeks before she ever walked through that gym's doors. So the questions here aren't just what happened the night she disappeared anymore. They're bigger, and they're harder to sit with. Was Elena Moore actually afraid for her life, the way her friend says she told her directly? Was something happening inside that marriage that nobody outside of it could see? Why did multiple people who saw her in the days before describe her as confused, disoriented, not herself? And why does the private investigator working with her own husband's family say the fear claim falls apart the moment you actually look at it? Those are the threads we're pulling on in this video. And by the end, you'll have all of them laid out. Not resolved, because they aren't resolved yet, but laid out clearly enough for you to weigh them yourself, the way investigators are doing right now. Before we go any further, let's slow down and talk about who Elena Catherine Moore actually was. Because this case has already become a debate about her marriage, her mental state, her husband, and somewhere in all of that, it's easy to lose the actual person at the center of it. She was 39 years old, living in Lexington, South Carolina, a town of roughly 23,000 people just west of Columbia. It's the kind of close-knit community where people know their neighbors, where a missing woman becomes front-page local news within hours, not days. Elena worked as a personal trainer. By every account, this was her real passion, the work she cared most about. But that wasn't her only job. She also worked at a CVS pharmacy, and she bartended at multiple bars around the Lexington area. 3 jobs. 3 completely separate circles of people who knew her face, her name, her routine, her voice. That's not someone who exists quietly on the margins of a community. That's someone embedded in the middle of it. Her relationship with Brandon Slice went back more than 13 years before the two of them made it official in 2024. 13 years of history together before a wedding. By the time Elena disappeared, that marriage was less than 2 years old. Her friend Lauren Beasley told Fox News Digital that she'd last spoken with Elena about a month before the disappearance. And that, in her words, everything seemed completely normal. Elena didn't say anything personal about her relationship, her work, anything going on in her life. On the surface, by that account, there were no visible cracks at all. Brandon himself isn't a stranger to law enforcement work. According to Henry Dukes, the private investigator now working with Brandon's family, Brandon spent a career as a deputy with the Lexington County Sheriff's Office before becoming a private investigator himself. Dukes and Brandon had known each other for years, working together both during and after Brandon's time in law enforcement. The kind of working relationship where, in Dukes' own words, we've not only worked together, but we have also helped each other. Dukes describes Brandon as a great individual, someone he says he can't say anything bad about, even now, with everything that's swirling around him publicly. And what does Dukes say about how Brandon is actually doing right now, privately, away from the cameras? Not well. He's not doing good at all, Dukes said. He's grieving. The two of them, Dukes said, had built a life together over more than a decade, and Brandon had planned on spending the rest of his life with her. The woman, in Dukes' words, that he loved. Dukes even shared a small, almost uncomfortable detail in the middle of an otherwise heavy conversation, that he used to joke with Brandon, telling him he didn't know what Elena saw in him. A joke that, in this context, lands very differently now. Now here's the detail I want you to actually hold on to, because we're coming back to it more than once in this video. By every account available, Elena was active on social media, not occasionally, not passively, but regularly posting, engaging, visible. The kind of presence where her friends would notice an absence almost immediately, and they did. One friend described her sudden silence over the final month as flatly out of character. Remember that phrase. It's gonna matter again. Thursday, June 11th, 2026. At approximately 6:40 in the evening, Elena Catherine Moore signs into the Planet Fitness at 560 Whiteford Way in Lexington. This is her regular gym. This is part of her established routine. Nothing about walking through those doors that evening is unusual in any way. But here's where the night starts to diverge from anything resembling routine. At some point after going inside, she leaves. And instead of getting into a car, police have confirmed she did not have a vehicle with her that evening. She walks, away from the Planet Fitness, toward the wooded area behind a nearby Lowe's home improvement store. Why she headed in that specific direction, on foot, with no transportation waiting for her, is a question that still doesn't have an answer. The story doesn't stop there, because new surveillance footage that surfaced later shifted the entire timeline investigators had been working from. At 9:17 that evening, roughly 2.5 hours after she first signed into the gym, Elena Moore is captured on camera again, this time in a Publix parking lot at 100 Old Cherokee Road. Same outfit as when she left the gym, an olive green zip-up hoodie, black athletic pants. She's walking, and she's heading in the direction of Old Cherokee Road itself. That footage, as far as investigators have confirmed, is the last confirmed sighting of Elena Moore alive. No car. Possibly no phone. Police said publicly they were uncertain whether she even had it on her that night. By the following Monday, her phone wasn't pinging anywhere at all. She's on foot, in the dark, moving steadily away from everything familiar to her. And then, nothing. No more footage. No more sightings. It's worth pausing here on just how close together all of these locations actually are. According to Henry Dukes, who knows the area well, the distance between that Publix parking lot, her last confirmed location, and the spot where she would ultimately be found, is roughly a quarter mile. A 10 to 15 minute walk at most, in his words, even if you stop to tie your shoe. That's not a woman who traveled far into unfamiliar territory that night. Whatever happened to Elena Moore happened within a remarkably small radius of where she was last seen alive, on foot, walking calmly down a road in a town where she'd lived for years. The following day, June 12th, someone reports her missing. That someone is her husband, Brandon Slice. The search for Elena Moore officially begins. If a case like this has you wondering how something can unravel this quietly, this fast, this close to home, you're not alone. And there's still more in this story that doesn't add up. Hit subscribe right now before we go any further, because we're about to go back exactly 1 week to a piece of footage that changes the way you see everything that happens after it. The night Elena disappeared was not the first sign that something was wrong. Not even close. Let's go back exactly 1 week, to June 4th, 2026. A couple, Sarah Burles and John Moore, no relation to Elena, live about a half-mile from the Planet Fitness. That day, their Ring doorbell camera caught something that, looking back, is deeply unsettling. A DoorDash driver drops off a food order at their front door. Elena Moore walks up and picks up the order as though it belongs to her. John Moore opens the door, takes the food back, and turns to go inside. And that's the moment Elena starts to follow him into the house, as if she lives there. He later told News Nation, in his own words, "Once I got the food from her, and I turned to walk back in the house, whenever she started to walk in the house with me, she seemed really confused and disoriented about where she was or whatever she was doing." Confused. Disoriented. Sarah Burles separately told reporters that when she spoke directly with Elena that same day, Elena said she didn't know what she was doing. Not lost in the geographic sense, but genuinely, mentally lost. Even Henry Dukes, the private investigator now defending Brandon publicly, doesn't try to wave this footage away. Asked directly about it, his response was blunt. "That video was disturbing. I don't think there's any hidden fact that there was something going on. Whatever else is disputed in this case, that much isn't." Around that same window of time, Brandon Slice left a comment on a Facebook post stating that his wife was not well. 2 words. The post was deleted not long after. Now here's where this case takes a sharper, more complicated turn. Because there's a second account that surfaced separately, and it tells a very different kind of story about those same final weeks. A friend of Elena's named Sandra has said that in the period leading up to the disappearance, Elena told her there was trouble in the marriage. That things had deteriorated to the point where, in Sandra's account, Elena said she was scared for her life, that there was crazy stuff going on, and that the two of them were heading towards separation. Put those 2 threads side by side for a second. On one hand, a woman who appears on camera and in a direct conversation with a neighbor, confused, disoriented, possibly in the middle of a mental health crisis. On the other, a woman who allegedly told a close friend, in plain language, that she feared for her life inside her own home. Neither account cancels the other out automatically. It's entirely possible both are describing the same unraveling from 2 different angles. It's also possible they're describing 2 completely separate things happening to the same woman in the same stretch of time. Untangling which one, or whether it's both, is exactly the job in front of investigators right now. June 12th. Elena is reported missing, and what follows over the next several days is a multi-agency search operation that spans nearly a week and pulls in national attention. Lexington Police Department deploys a drone over the wooded area directly behind the Planet Fitness and Lowe's. A preliminary sweep turns up nothing. By Monday, June 15th, Lexington PD brings in significant reinforcement. The Lexington County Sheriff's Department, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the Department of Natural Resources, SC Highway Patrol, Fire Services, and EMS. Together, these agencies search the wooded areas along Common Farm Lane in detail, house by house, tree by tree. Police Chief Terrence Green is direct with the public about what this phase of the search actually is. This is not a recovery operation. This is about ruling out locations, about being methodical. The result of that specific search, in his own words, no trace of Miss Moore was found during the operation. Then, briefly, a false report begins circulating on social media claiming Elena had been found. Relief spreads quickly through an anxious community, and then police pull the claim back. It wasn't true. She hadn't been found at all. A town that was already on edge grows more frustrated, asking openly why that post went up in the first place and who led it. On the night of June 16th, a resident comes forward with a new and specific tip. They say they saw Elena heading into the wooded area near Lakeside Middle School, down the road from the Publix, where she was last caught on camera on the actual night she disappeared. That single tip is about to change the entire direction of this case. So here's exactly where things stand at this point in the story. Elena Moore was last confirmed alive at 9:17 p.m. on June 11th, walking down Old Cherokee Road. A week before that, multiple separate witnesses describe her as confused and disoriented. Her husband called her not well, in a post he later deleted. A friend says Elena told her directly that she feared for her life inside her marriage. None of these threads, the confusion, the deleted post, the fear claim, have been officially connected to one another. Not by police, not by anyone with the authority to confirm it. Let's talk directly about Brandon Slice, because the moment a married woman goes missing, the internet looks at the husband. That's simply the reality of true crime culture in 2026. And in this case, the scrutiny arrived fast and it arrived hard. Here's exactly what's been said publicly, point by point, and here's what actually holds up against it. First claim: Brandon wasn't flooding his own social media with public pleas for his missing wife. No constant updates, no visible emotional appeals. People online found that strange, even suspicious for a husband in his position. Second claim: that deleted Facebook comment. He said his wife was not well, and then the post disappeared. In the court of public opinion, deleting anything while your spouse is missing reads as guilt. People asked openly what exactly he was trying to hide. Third claim, and this is the one that has genuinely reshaped this story: Sandra's account. A friend on record saying Elena told her directly that she was scared for her life and that there was real trouble inside the marriage. Now here's the pushback, and it isn't coming from an anonymous account in a comment section. It's coming from Henry Dukes, a retired Lexington County Sheriff's deputy turned private investigator, currently working directly with Brandon's family. Dukes confirmed something that had previously only existed as unverified rumor: that Brandon really is former law enforcement, and that the two men worked together for years before each of them transitioned into private investigation work. Dukes disclosed that relationship himself openly and argued it isn't a conflict of interest. In his words, it's exactly why he was the first person called once this happened. Family and friends have made the statement that if they wanted anybody out there doing this, that was me. On Sandra specifically, Dukes did not hold back. He pointed out that despite describing herself as a close friend, Sandra had not been interviewed by law enforcement, while other friends and family members had. He referenced her own words back to the reporter who'd spoken with her, that Sandra herself admitted, "I'm sick," that she didn't have the complete facts. Dukes' framing of this was blunt. She has no factual information to provide. She needs to stay in her lane. And on the actual substance of Sandra's claim, his position was equally direct. If it had risen to the level of somebody's life being in danger, I think that it would have been being dealt with. Dukes also pushed back on the idea that he or Brandon's family are hiding behind privacy. "I'm not saying that there might not have been something going on," he said. "What I'm saying is that's private." Brandon and Elena, in his words, were very private people to a certain extent, which, depending on how you read it, either explains the silence publicly or raises exactly the kind of questions Sandra's account is pointing toward. But Dukes didn't dismiss everything Sandra or anyone else has raised. When asked directly about the Ring camera footage from June 4th, he didn't try to explain it away or minimize it. His own words: "That video was disturbing. I don't think there's any hidden fact that there was something going on." So even the family's own investigator isn't claiming nothing was wrong. He's drawing one specific, narrower line. Something was happening with Elena in her final days. But in his view, Sandra's specific claim about fearing for her life inside the marriage doesn't hold up against what he understands of the facts. There's also one detail that has lingered, completely unanswered throughout this entire story. A reporter asked Dukes directly whether Elena had recently been in a mental health facility. His response: "Nothing that I can speak on. That is not something I would have permission to talk about." That is not a denial. It is also not a confirmation. It is the response of someone who very clearly knows more than he is willing to say publicly. And there's a broader frustration running underneath all of Dukes' comments, directed not just at Sandra, but at the public reaction to this case as a whole. Asked how Brandon is handling people online openly suggesting he killed his wife, Dukes didn't soften it. "How would you deal with it if people were online saying that you killed your wife? That's devastating. I can't say it any other way. It's unnecessary." His closing message on the speculation, more broadly: everybody needs to pump the brakes. Let these people do their job and stop trying to make wild accusations with no factual basis. So where does that leave us? Is it possible Sandra's account is accurate and that something genuinely dangerous was missed in the weeks before Elena disappeared? Yes, that's possible. Is it also possible her account is incomplete, secondhand, or exaggerated, exactly as the family's own investigator argues? That's also possible. Both versions are now sitting in the same case file, attributed to two different people who both claim closeness to Elena. Only one of them is the more accurate version of her final weeks, and right now, nobody outside the investigation knows which. June 17th, 2026. Acting on the tip from the night before, officers and fire personnel begin an extensive search of the wooded areas along Old Cherokee Road at 1:30 in the afternoon. Multiple agencies are on foot, combing through the trees in detail. At 2:48 in the afternoon, they find a body. It's wearing an olive green zip-up hoodie and black athletic pants, the same exact outfit Elena had on the night she disappeared. The specific location is a creek bed beneath a bridge known locally as 14 Mile Creek. A guardrail, a cement curb, and a drop of roughly 8 to 12 feet down to the water below. Police Chief Terrence Green confirmed the discovery at a press conference in his exact words, "At approximately 2:48 in the afternoon, we found an unidentified body that fits the clothing description of our missing person." Lexington County Coroner Margaret Fisher followed with a statement confirming a female body matching that clothing description had been found, while being careful to add that no positive identification had been made and no cause of death determined. That distinction matters more than it might seem. According to Henry Dukes, identifying a body isn't always the quick, simple process people expect from television. "It's not what we always see on TV," he said, "where you walk into a room and they pull this thing out of a cooler and you look at it and go, there you go." With 6 days having passed since Elena was last seen, in South Carolina's summer heat, decomposition becomes a real factor. As Dukes put it, decomposure can start. It starts immediately. And that complicates everything from a visual identification to determining cause of death itself. The coroner's office, in his account, was working at that point from two main indicators: clothing that matched what Elena was last seen wearing, and a location consistent with where she was last caught on camera. A positive identification would still require forensic confirmation, fingerprints, dental records, or formal pathology before anything could be stated as fact. And then comes the detail that shifts the entire tone of this investigation. Lexington Police Department requested that SLED D, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, the state's major crimes unit, take over the death investigation. There's a specific jurisdictional wrinkle worth noting here too. Dukes pointed out that the bridge itself may technically fall just outside Lexington City's jurisdiction, sitting instead within Lexington County, which on its own could partially explain why a larger agency was brought in. He also noted that SLED maintains its own crime lab and investigators stationed throughout the state, available to assist any local agency on serious cases, which is part of why their involvement isn't unusual on its own. But when a reporter asked Chief Green directly whether foul play was suspected, he did not say no. He said it remained an active investigation, and that SLED was now handling it. That is not the language of a department that believes a woman simply wandered into the woods and died of natural causes. Here is exactly where this case stands right now. A body matching Elena Moore's clothing description has been found in a creek bed beneath a bridge, a short walk from where she was last seen alive. SLED is now running the death investigation. No cause of death has been confirmed. According to Henry Dukes, the autopsy was scheduled for the following Saturday. But even once that's complete, full toxicology results could take, in his words, 2 to 3 weeks, a month, maybe even longer. Underneath all of that procedural detail, two completely unresolved accounts of Elena's final weeks are still sitting side by side. A friend who says Elena feared for her life inside her marriage. A family investigator who says that fear, if it existed at all, never reached a level that would have triggered any kind of intervention. Neither the police nor the coroner's office have confirmed which version is closer to the truth. And as of right now, neither one is officially ruled out. If the autopsy ultimately points toward homicide, every one of these threads, the deleted Facebook post, Sandra's account, the unanswered mental health question, Brandon's own law enforcement background, becomes something investigators will have to test directly against physical evidence not simply discuss. If it points instead toward an accident tied to a mental health crisis that multiple people noticed, but no one caught in time, then this becomes a fundamentally different kind of tragedy. Not a question of who did what to whom, but a question of how a woman who was visibly struggling in front of multiple separate witnesses in the days before she died still ended up alone in the dark with nobody close enough to stop it. Either way, as Dukes himself acknowledged, the coroner's office still has to provide a finalized, accurate set of facts to the public. And that process, by his own account, doesn't mean that the coroner won't release some information before the full report is complete. Elena Moore deserved to come home from that gym on a Thursday night like any other. She deserved to have a friend's warning checked by someone with the authority to act on it, not just repeated after the fact. She deserved a system that took not well seriously the first time someone said it out loud. Instead of after she was found in a creek bed below a bridge, her own neighbors drive over without a second thought. She deserved better than becoming the center of a public argument between two people who both say they were close to her, each holding a different version of her final weeks. Whatever the autopsy ultimately shows, whatever SLED D determines when this investigation concludes, we owe Elena Moore the truth, not the version that's easiest to believe, and not the version that protects anyone's reputation over hers. If this case has stayed with you the way it's clearly stayed with so many people watching right now, tell me which account you believe in the comments and subscribe to our channel if you are yet to, as we will be bringing you more updates about this case as it unfolds.